So what are we here to talk about today? ABCD, yes, and that stands for asset-based community development. I'm not gonna read through all this. We do have some handouts for you that we'll get into your hands in just a moment. But in a nutshell, asset-based community development is essentially saying that everyone has something to contribute. There are assets in their neighborhood. And the way that's talked about is through their gifts, talents, abilities, dreams, and aspirations. If you're taking notes, I'll write those 4 things down. What are their gifts? What are their talents? What are their abilities, dreams, and aspirations? So when you think of gifts of the head, gifts of the heart, and gifts of the hands. So that's another way of adding to that. Gifts of the head, gifts of the heart, and gifts of the hands. So gifts of the head are intellectual things, right? Like something they're interested about, they like learning about, and would like to share that with other people, right? I had a friend I grew up with, he did terrible in school, but the guy was such a history buff. His dad was a Vietnam vet, and he could tell you about US history like crazy. And it's like he had that gift of the head of understanding US history, right? There's people in our community that have different types of knowledge that they could share with our community, right? Gifts of the heart. So those are going to be things that are passions of people's heart. The way I tend to try to listen for that and talking to somebody is they tend to say, people tend to say something like, somebody needs to do something about that, right? That's because it's tugging at their heart, right? At some point it got to their heart and they're like, we need to change that. That's a cue for me as I'm talking to folks like, there's something there to explore, right? And then gifts of the hands, the easiest to explain. What can people do constructively with their hands that they would also like to do with others? We have someone on staff, he loves to bake, but she really likes to bake to bring it to our staff meetings, and we're thankful for that.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So she enjoys doing it on her own, but what she really gets a kick out of is bringing it and sharing it with us, right? So that's the gift. She knows how to bake well, but she wants to contribute that to the community, gifts of the hands. And then dreams and aspirations. For some, as we get to know them in our communities, it will take longer to get to what their dreams and aspirations are because they've been buried for so long, but everybody has it. I would say, I think social scientists say like 80+% of people want good for themselves, good for their family, and good for others, right? But the news shows us the 5% that don't want any of that, right? And so we believe everybody is that way. But as we get to meet people and get to learn about their lives, we find out like, yeah, you know what, they do have positive aspirations for their kids. Life just kind of got them right now, right? The housing crash of 2008, they're still trying to recoup from that. Friends I know that are in that situation, right? To this day. But they're in there, those dreams and aspirations. So your role, and by using asset-based community development is to try to figure out what those dreams and aspirations are and activate them for the good of the community. Now that's the work, right? The journey with them and try to encourage them to be activated in that. I probably went off subject. I go off subject again? Yeah, probably. Sorry, I gotta go off. Anyways, I went too far as I look at our notes. I'll hand it over to Ivan. Ivan will bring it back in order. Any questions on what I covered?
A little warm in here. I'll see if I next to the sun. Any questions? No? Okay, I'm not gonna go on tangents, so just kidding. I never do. Okay, next.
I think that's important. So I'm like a data person, right? I've learned this. It's like, where did ABC come from? Like it didn't just come from the ground, right? So back in 1988, John McKnight and his buddy John Petzman, they were 2 colleagues at the Center of Urban Affairs at Northwestern University. They did a study in a community for like over 4 years. And they discovered that a lot of institutions would come in put in what they thought were solutions in the neighborhood, and they left, and what happened? Nothing changed, there was no transformation. And so after doing this, I think 4 years, I'm like, oh, institutions or agencies are coming in and they're not asking people what they want to work on, what are the issues, and also understanding that the solutions were found already by the people who live in these neighborhoods, right? So that's always a big important piece of like, we talk about ABCD, but where did it come from? John McKnight, John Kritzman out of Northwestern University. Oh, wait. Yeah, and now, Ivan, you can talk all about your points now.
So can you get the next slide, please? Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things because there's a lot of different types of community workers. In fact, in Fresno, I'm not sure if y'all know, y'all know what the top 3 largest industries are in Fresno? Anybody want to take a guess? If you did the blue cap, please look.
I don't ask you.
You guys know? So it's ag, food, and social services, right? There's a history behind that I won't get into, but there has been a lot of decades and decades and decades of work in our communities. A lot of what happens often is people, when they start, when there's not a lot of resources and people need to start something to help people, usually it's more direct service oriented. What do I mean by direct service? So by direct service, I mean meeting an individual where they're at and providing support or resources. And so it's like very, very much about giving and helping, which we need that. Nobody should be thirsty, nobody should be hungry on this planet. Unfortunately, hunger and thirst are real things. And I think it's the right thing to do to feed people, to support them, to provide resources for them. But direct service sometimes kind of gets a little bit, it has a backfiring effect. If you do it so long, sometimes the people will not know how to care for themselves. So this is where community development comes in. So community development is kind of the next step of life, empowering folks to do it for themselves, both individuals and communities. So community development is, it's not necessarily trying to provide a service or support. It's really trying to empower people to be able to do that for themselves and their communities. So a good example of that is this ancient proverb. Many of you have heard it, and it goes something like this. It sounds like a rap song.
Ivan, don't go past.
Oh, sorry.
Don't go past here.
Okay. Sorry. All
Record.
right. So,
There you go.
anyways, what that means is just so the proverb says something like, "Feed a man a fish, he will eat for a day." Do you guys know the rest? Teach a man to fish, and he will eat for a lifetime. So, community development. There's a lot of that happening in our city. There's a lot of direct service. Community organizing has another element, and I know that a lot of folks are coming with maybe with some presuppositions about what community organizing is, because there's a lot of grants, there's a lot of funding to multiply community organizers. So the term has kind of gotten very loose. It's just someone that organizes stuff or events. Traditionally, a community organizer is somebody that even if people taught other folks how to fish so they can eat for a lifetime, sometimes there's a constructed wall around the pond. What do you do even if you teach people? They don't have access. So what community organizing is really about, it's about deconstructing those types of systems that prevent people from having access to empowerment. Does that make sense? It's really about empowering people to tear down that wall so that everybody can have access. Next slide, please. So ABCD is really, it's somewhere in between community development and community organizing with a little bit more weight on the organizing part. And we're going to go into it, and you're going to see how it's actually very, very strategic about empowering people. Another thing I have to mention is community outreach applies to direct service, it applies to community development, and it applies to community organizing. All of those types of models actually they require some level of community engagement. So community engagement doesn't necessarily mean community organizing. That's where people get kind of stuck. Because they feel like as they're making phone calls, they're bringing people together and organizing them, they are a community organizer. Community organizer is about strategizing to tear down systems so that people can have access. I'm gonna keep emphasizing that. So next slide. So let me ask y'all this question. When it comes to community outreach, what works? What works? When it comes to reaching out to the community, what is working for y'all?
The one-on-one conversation. Yep.
What was that?
The one-on-one conversation.
One-on-one conversations. Good, good. And how do you do that? How do you get to that point?
Being in their neighborhood. In the building, and then, being in the space that they're in.
Good, good. Good job. Good job. I wish I had candy so I can. Anybody else?
Well, for our neighborhood, we have a neighborhood school, Jackson, and what's helped me is get connected with the school by volunteering at the school, meeting with the parents, going to the parent engagement hours, school side council meetings, like getting connected with the school and the parents in that way, as well as the students.
So networking with institutions and then the people from the community that participate in those institutions. That's good. What else? That's really good.
They're gonna be a good listener
Good listener.
without feeling like I have to solve all of their crises and then help me do it for her.
So when it comes to outreach though, what is your plan or what does your strategy look like?
Ours being consistent, being in the community, like, we do monthly events, we do after-school programs, and it's not just the after-school program, because then we get to talk to the parents. And that opens up other conversations and resources for them,
So you create the space with events,
yeah.
people come in, there's foot traffic, kind of like what you did the other day, right?
Yeah.
And then other
Yesterday.
people are like, did you know?
Yesterday.
I mean, dude, when you guys did that though, right? There was booths. Did you guys notice? How many of you guys went to the Martin Park? Okay, cool. All right, so good job, by the way. So if you notice, there's booths out there. What are they doing? They're doing community outreach.
Yeah.
The only thing is that you created the space and other people want to jump on it to
Yeah.
recruit too. So yeah, creating spaces, that's one model. What else?
Something that, so Susan shared it, she said knocking on doors.
Knocking
right?
on
That's
doors is another
canvassing.
model.
It's called canvassing,
Canvassing.
right?
Monthly community meetings.
Community meetings are also good. There you go. That's another model. I'm gonna go ahead.
Survey.
Surveys. I was hoping someone was gonna say that because we're gonna get into it a little bit, but I'm just being, this is where I'm a little like, what is it? I don't know. Ivan te pasas, not Ivan pasas, but Ivan te pasas. Te pasas, that means extra, like you go extra, like, but it's like humor, like, you know, anyways, haha.
Like you're being too much.
Yeah, you're being too much.
Far and beyond.
Anyway, so what I usually do with surveys is, no matter who the grant source is, I'm just like, I do let them know I'm gonna do this. I don't ask them for permission all the time, unless they disagree. But I slap a few of my own questions onto the survey. So like, do you know your neighbor? Do you want to know your neighbor? Do you care about your community? Those 3 questions is all you need. And when you do the survey, you're gonna have all the people that, and then one of the questions, do you want to meet your neighbors? So then all the people that said yes, I'm like, I don't care about the rest of the survey, but the people that said yes, I'm gonna put them right here and I'm gonna follow up and do one-on-ones. So that's another model. I saw another hand over here.
I was just saying, when we do events like a cleanup, it gives us the opportunity to connect with the neighbors and hear their input on certain situations. And that's helped with us, and we have also our monthly association meetings where we're just not sharing information, but we're taking information that's been shared to us as an organization, what our residents want to see or want to have more of.
Good. Great. So outreach, door knocking, events, surveys with extra questions attached. There's a variety of different models. Let me ask the next question. When it comes to community organizing, what works? What is working for you? In terms of changing policy, blocking certain projects that are detrimental to your community. Go ahead.
I think a lot of that is being able to teach and inform, like I think a lot of residents feel like I have no impact, so when do you go to city hall, who do you write letters to, what does that look like? And empowering them that their voice does matter and understanding the system.
Yes, understanding the system, great. What else?
For us, we've invited our neighborhood split up in 2 districts, 5 and 7, so we've invited the council members as far as and towers to our events, so the residents can get to know them. It's like even with the
Yeah.
neighborhood watch, the detectives,
Yeah.
the scores.
That's really good, so including some of our civic leaders into it, because they represent the system and the structure, right? And I think also with community meetings, just a little bonus right here, extra for you. I'll send you my invoice later, but sometimes when you create a community meeting, make sure that the table of power or the table of control is in the hands of the community. Because what happens often is you create this community meeting, you invite a council member. Usually they step in like a prince with the media and everything, and all of a sudden they hijack your meeting. And then not only that, but the residents have a tendency to bow the knee to people of power. So like you have to really teach them that they are public servants and that the table that you created, they got to give account to that table, depending on the nature of the meeting. But they're invitees, they're guests. The residents are, in this case, reverse plantation owners. So I don't know if that's a good. All right, next one.
So, how do you then build the trust with the local decision makers to continue to come out to these meetings when that happens? Because what they tend to do when that happens is like, they're like, no, let's stay away from like the hopeful encounters community meetings, like.
Yeah, well, number one, it's really about training your back, and that's why I like the ABCD model, is because it's not very as agitation. As for example, so in community organizing, you have the Alinsky model traditionally, which is very agitational. That's what would use the boycott concept, like MLK, Cesar Chavez, all of those boycotting things that worked really well back then because it was radical. Today, I think the ABCD model is probably the best because it's about inclusion. I want to say that council members and people in power won't ever, I don't think, this is my opinion, but I don't think they'll ever fully trust any community group. They've been thrown rocks at. Some deserve it, some don't, I guess. But the thing is, we have to train our residents to collect facts before they speak. So make sure you have your facts together. And then number two, make sure that they present the facts respectfully. And then number three, they got to recognize that calling them names or making them cry or telling them an inspirational story is not going to make them push a green button on their panel. They're not gonna be like, oh, they touched my heart, please. No, what's gonna cause them to steer is when you understand boundary lines, money, distribution, where their money's being allocated. When you have facts, has nothing to do with the council person, the elected official. It has everything to do with the management, the thing that is being managed. So I think it's gathering the facts and making sure that residents understand respect. But I think, and you'll see it when we go through the spiral. I think what's most important when the trust is built is when in the research phase. And we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, so everybody has a handout that looks like there's a little colorful, beautiful spiral. It looks like a spiral with colors and numbers. Sorry. I'm always moving that for us. All right, y'all see it? So we're gonna go through that in a bit. Christian's gonna help us with that, and Daniel as well. If you guys notice, the very first point says learning conversations. Learning conversations are really the key to discovering leaders and activating them. And we'll get into that in a sec. But before we apply this community organizing spiral, let's say you're in your neighborhood, there's an issue with the property, maybe a vacant property, maybe there's, what do you call it, squatters inside that property. What do you do? Okay, so one, you should probably, if you don't live in the neighborhood, or if you did, it's good to ask a map first. And so you also have another handout that has an asset map. So the asset map really tries to identify, so one, look at a map and try to figure out what the boundaries are, not what other people say the boundaries are, but what the community feels the boundaries are. Okay, so because just because you see a map with someone else created lines around it doesn't mean that's their way of controlling us. But who do we identify with? Once you do that, then you start identifying three things: institutions like parks, schools, things of that nature. Number two, you'll have businesses. And then number three, residents. Who are the top residents that stand out to you? So this is, by the way, this is pre-work before, again, I'm emphasizing before you apply step one on the spiral. Asset map, and then number two, do some demographic research. If you go to just Google census 2023 or whatever, and then it gives you maps. And you can play with those maps enough to understand the demographic in whatever neighborhood you're working with. So it'll tell you how many women are there, how many men, how many children, poverty rate, education rate, all of that stuff. But it'll tell you everything you need to know about that community. But they don't tell the full story. They only tell the story that was produced by surveys and numbers. Okay, so there's always going to be an incomplete. If your neighborhood has a high crime rate, but that's all people emphasize is the numbers of the crime rate, that creates a distorted image of the neighborhood because it's not an evil neighborhood. There's a lot of great people in there, hardworking families, everything else. So you're only going to discover that in the learning conversations. So you do some demographic, geographic research. You don't need a lot, but you need enough so that when you talk to residents, and they have assumptions about their own neighborhood, you can kind of like maneuver the conversation until they discover the truth. Sometimes some people have their own distorted view of their own neighborhood. So it's good to have these facts. Number three, the survey idea. Surveys are not learning conversations. Surveys are not learning conversations. I say that because a lot of people, I ask them, how many learning conversations have you done? They're like 200. And I'm like, wow, that's. And then I find out it was just a survey. That's not a learning conversation.
Wait, so what was that again?
Surveys are not learning conversations. The survey is only going to help you identify the people who are interested. If you attach those questions that I told you, do you like, do you know your neighbors? Do you want to meet the neighbors or whatever? You get those people that say yes. Then you have learning conversations with them. Does that make sense? The cool thing about doing the survey part is it makes it less awkward. If you go and you knock and you're like, and they open, and I want to have a 40-minute conversation with you, they'll be like, boom. But if you say, hey, we have a survey for the neighborhood, I'm a resident or a community builder. There was this crime situation that happened the other day. What are your thoughts on it? You got 10 minutes? Sure, everybody wants to give you the thoughts. And then at the end it says, do you want to meet your neighbor? Yes. So you get those people together. Does this help y'all? Does this help you? This is the little stuff in between the steps. After you do that research, once you collect those surveys and you have those responses, what you want to do is you want to follow up with the people that said yes. You follow up with the learning conversation. Oh, Diane. Learning conversations. There, look like a different bullet point. Next slide, please. I can just tap in here, huh?
No, I'm zooming in.
Okay. So what is a learning conversation? The learning conversation is fundamentally the building block of community organizing. There's a line here that I can't see and I keep crossing it. It's the fundamental building block of community organizing. So the survey gave you data. Again, the survey is not a learning conversation. It gives you data. The learning conversation gives you story. And it gives you an opportunity to enter into somebody's mind and heart. I know that sounds evil, but it's not. So there's several types of people that you'll encounter when you do the follow-up. One, they're people that know what they want. They're very few, very, very few. They know what they want for the community and they have an idea. They just don't have the people power because they don't, maybe they haven't gone out and knocked on doors as a resident, but they have they have a fire in them. Then there's number two, there's people that don't know that they want it yet. Okay. And sometimes just being in community with the other residents and learning and stuff like that, they discover that they're very passionate about that situation. And then number three, there are people that really don't care. Okay. So the people that really don't care, don't even waste 40 minutes with them. I've told people, sometimes I can tell, like, I don't know, they're just like, Ivan looks cool or whatever, and they just want to talk. And I'm like sensing like, they're into something else besides this. And I just had to tell them like, look, or sometimes they want to please me. They're like, yeah, I'll do this, I'll do that. And they never show up. How many of you guys have had those that are always excited with you, but they never show? Just cut them off. You know, I don't know why they're doing that. There's a variety of reasons. All right, learning conversations. I'll move on from here, but Fred Ross, who is the organizer of he's the one that trained Cesar Chavez, older white guy. They didn't get along very well, but then eventually they bonded and they started organizing the United Farm Workers Union. Fred Ross talks about something called a social arsonist. Social arsonist. Can anybody think of what that means? Anybody want to take a jab?
Getting people excited for a
Yeah.
social.
It's setting people on fire, not like, but more like in here.
Emotionally, right? Motivationally.
Yeah. Motivationally. So when you do a learning conversation, you're really trying to find a couple of things. What is their interest? Are they interest? Or what is their interest? Or are they interested in what I'm bringing? Or number three, what would they fight for? And usually you find that in their story. And oftentimes their story is tied into trauma. And sometimes that trauma is tied into the neighborhood. And it's when you can go in there and you can somehow ask the right questions and give the right type of affirmation, it can kind of cause their hearts to combust and set a flame and then hopefully a raging fire. Have you guys ever been hit like that? Anybody? Yeah. Someone just spoke to you and your heart just went, and now you went and found your calm. So that's what the learning conversation does. You're not going to do that with the survey. The other thing about the learning conversation, and I'll move on, is that it helps you take inventory of the neighborhood. The more people that you have conversations with and you document it, you're going to start seeing a colorful thing. Like, wow, there's all these gifts and there's all these stories, there's all these warriors, there's like all this stuff, you know? But it helps you take inventory of the things that no survey, no demographic research can teach you. The other thing that it does is it creates consciousness on the part of the resident. So while you guys are having the conversations, they're verbally processing and discovering, wow, I didn't realize I was so passionate about this. Right? And so you're doing two things right there. All right, next slide. Well, any questions on that?
In our next workshop, we're gonna spend a lot more time into like what it looks like to actually conduct a learning conversation. But this is the first step in our spiral.
Okay, I gotta wrap it up, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, number two. So you have learning conversations, blah, 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 and then you go to number two. So can you take out, I gave you guys a copy of a spreadsheet. Did you guys see that? I'm gonna look at it with you, because I don't know where it is. All right. So this spreadsheet is a copy of one of my previous jobs when I did Better Blackstone. I knocked on over 1,700 doors, hundreds of conversations, created about 8 to 11 groups. Some of them fell apart because of cheese man and dumb stuff, little dumb stuff. You gotta watch out sometimes. But one of the cool things that I did was I was able to document everything. So this is, I mean, I'm not gonna put their phone numbers on there. I cut a lot of stuff out. This is the important stuff that I want you to look at, is that when you do these learning conversations, what you can do is when you get your surveys, you can put their contact information on the spreadsheet. The people that said yes, they want to meet their neighbor. Then when you do learning conversations, you can start inputting parts of that conversation into the spreadsheet. Y'all get this? So what happens is once you do this with the spreadsheet, you can start seeing people's interests. What do you guys see about their interests? Do you guys notice anything? Some aren't sure, but do you notice that there's actually the same, like people share common interests, right? Tenant justice, stuff like that. So what you do then is after you highlight the birds of a feather, then you flock them together, right? So you bring them to number 2, which is forum connector leaders. A lot of people have been confused about number 2 and how do you transition from 1 to 2? I'm giving you the key right now with this. What you do is you call all the people that you highlighted in yellow. You see that? So let's say there's 20 people that share that yellow. What you do is you call them up, or you call the one that is most promising, the one that you really connected with, and you tell them the thing. Hey, I got 20 people that care about the same issue that you cared about. What do you think? Should we like come together and do like coffee, potluck or something? Usually they get fired up because they're like 20 people care about the same thing. Then you bring them together. Boom. You have your first community meeting. This community meeting is really about helping them know each other. So what you do is the same questions you use for learning conversations, you have them apply it to each other in pairs. And then you open it up after you let them talk, give them like an hour, let them talk for 30, 40 minutes, whatever. Give them a handout with the questions you used on them individually. Now they're going to use it with each other collectively. And what happens most of the time is when you open it up for everybody to share it, and then she raises her hand, what did you discover? And you're like, I discovered that so-and-so is not only just as adamant about, tenant justice, but also she's really tired of the situation in the alley. I thought I was the only one. And then someone else will pop up, like, hey, and then what it does is it creates synergy. It's one thing to be frustrated by yourself in a neighborhood, but when 20 other people are frustrated about the same thing and y'all come together and discover that, it creates a lot of energy. So that's what number 2 is about. It's really about making those connections. Then what you do is you send them out for more learning conversations. So that's what number 3 is. You tell them just what we did right here in this room with the handout and everything. And you guys, we'll meet in 2 weeks. Can you guys at least practice this with 3 other neighbors? And then we'll meet again and bring them to the meeting. So now they go out and they'll probably contact the neighbors they know that they feel okay with, and that's fine because they'll bring them in the next meeting. And then what you do there is then you start. Was he gonna share the story with the photo shoot?
I know. Go ahead. You can go through it.
Just kill it.
Yeah.
All right. So then choose issue for action. Sorry, I'm gonna. Oh yeah, un poquito. Just right here. Go ahead. Sorry. I'm just gonna draw something. That's all I need. It's the icon when you turn off the mouse on your computer. It's like, oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay, so you send them out, they have more learning conversations, they come back together for that second meeting, community meeting. And then what you do is you say, you guys are here because of, you guys want to do tenant justice, there's slum housing, there's abandoned homes, whatever. What are some other things that we can do Or maybe even like, what are some things that we can address? You know, usually I create that right there because people will tell you everything. And by the way, this is a brainstorm. So what you do is, even though tenant justice is the thing that brought them together, you want to find out all of the issues that people care about. So what are some issues you care about? Some people will name little things like, we don't have a stop sign on this side. So you put it on the left. And then someone's like, we want to turn this whole area into a green space, a park, like Martin Park. We want to be like Martin Park and put a park in our neighborhood. That's more on the second side. So what this means right here is that the left is short term and the right is long term. Okay? And the reason you want to do that, you want to bifurcate it or separate it, is because you want to start your group with a small project, like a stop sign. Even though everybody else wants to take the president down, like, you're not gonna do it. So on the left, you gotta make a case. We need to know our council members.
Short term, long term.
So just doing a small project like a stop sign, you'll get so familiar with the system. Yeah, thank you. Short term. Any questions on that?
We were just talking, is there like a third category, like ongoing, like when they like want a quieter, safer neighborhood, that's never that. That's an ongoing forever.
Yeah.
That's still fit long term nearby.
Yeah, it would be definitely. But this is a good start for now, with people that probably have never engaged the democratic process of any sort. You do something like that. Once you have all of this written in, yes, we can continue to do tenant justice, but sometimes what happens is by filling in the short term, most people will say, we do like the tenant justice, but now I'm starting to realize that's a long-term thing. So how do we do something small just to get familiar? You got to think of staircases. You can't just get to the top. You have to start building yourself to the top. You can't just go fight Tyson. I mean, he's old now. You'll probably knock him out. No, he's pretty strong still. But you can't go and fight Tyson without training. And you can't go and be a community organizer and tear down that wall from the pond if you've never even torn out a curb, right? So this is why it is important. Okay. Once you select the issue, whether it's tenant justice or whether you shift it to something else for a bit, what you want to do is you want to research. So research involves, yes, Google, yes, libraries. It also involves interviewing council members. And this is where I said, you don't just barge in and speak truth to power. Everybody wants to speak truth to power, but not everybody's prepared for it. So you got to be prepared. And the way to prepare is to interview them politely. Hey, how does this system work? How do I get a stop sign in the neighborhood? And this is where you create the panel of residents who are bringing in a council. Well, they'll probably be at City Hall interviewing the council member, but they still have to possess the power because they'll hijack it very quickly. And people will freely give it to them because they have a title or a label. So what you do is you research the issue, the stop sign. Oh, well, I need to talk to, Public Works. I need to do this, and that. You can also go into the City of Fresno's website and look at budgets. That's public information. You can also ask the council member, how much is in your budget for street repair? And they'll tell you. They have to, they can't lie to you. But most people don't ask those questions. Most people say, we want a stop sign. Whatever. That's not gonna work. What's gonna work is asking them, how much will a stop sign cost? How much money is there in it? Can you do half and can Public Works do half? Right? So
I could be opening a can of worms here, but they also have a line item budget. A budget, like that, budget line item for whatever they want to use. Now, that number fluctuates every year based on the annual budget for the city. But they have, it's like 300,000 at least that they get to use however they want. They can do a block party for a neighborhood. They can, but if they don't have anybody in the community asking for those funds to be utilized for the neighborhood, then they have nothing to be held accountable to. They do that however they want, right?
It's the least here, it doesn't anybody for money.
Yeah, anyway, sorry.
No, you're good. Earlier this year, remember when it was raining all crazy and trees were falling out of nowhere? Well, one tree in the Caltrans, my mom lives next to the freeway. One of the trees fell right on her carport, smashed everything. My mom was so like panicked. And I was like, Mom, I'll send your council member an email. There is every city must have a natural disaster relief fund. It's part of every city. Fresno hardly uses it because we don't have any natural disasters. So where does that money go? I don't know. And I don't even know how much money is in that budget. But when I sent that message, my mom got a little sad because I didn't tell them that she was my mom. And I said, Mom, I don't need to say that. All you need to know is that there's a budget there and you need to connect with them. She ended up telling them that I was her son. But you got to stay away from that because they're like, hey, I helped you and your family out. Come help me out. So be careful.
Can you share a little bit more detail? Like, not only did you send an email,
Mhm.
but like, because there was already a relationship, a
Yeah.
good standing relationship.
Yeah, so my council member is Nelson Esparza. Yeah, and that's my mom's council member as well. And we've had a good relationship since my previous job. So yeah, I guess because of the respectful, that doesn't mean that I said yes to everything he wants. We pushed against each other, but the key thing is you got to make them feel a little bit like they're a part of this. And that was the thing that I said in the Southern Blackstone project when I spoke to the council. I said, you know, this is our story, but it's also your story. You represent us. You're a part of this district. That right there, you got to remember that they got to feel included in that as well. And when you use that framework of story, we all know that in a story, there's always the good guy and the villain. So, you know, you kind of want to help them figure out what character they are in this story. So existing relationships that are respectful did help because they responded the same day, mostly because of the relationship. But I said my mom was a constituent, one of your constituents, and it works. So budgets. Any questions? No, all right, we're almost done. So once you do all this research, you should already, and you're documenting key points. You can't document everything, but key things. You have a bunch of puzzle pieces. All of a sudden you have a table full of data, information, and then you have a network of people. And so what you end up doing is you start connecting the dots with your community. You have another meeting. You can do this creatively where everybody has access to those components of information. And maybe you break them off into groups and have them put together an action plan. So if you have a group of 15 residents and you break them off into groups of 3, you'll have 5 groups. And you'll have 5 groups creating a proposed action plan to each other. At some point, they're gonna be like, I like hers. And someone else will be like, you know what, hers is cool. But if we connect what she wants to do with that proposal, you know, that idea, it gets even better. So that's kind of how you work the plan for action. You might need 1 meeting, you might need 2. But once you have it, if you have a good relationship with someone like your council member, and if they're not adversaries, if someone that you think that they're for what you guys are doing, you might want to bounce it off of their head because they understand the channels within the system. Does that make sense? So that's where you get to take action. After you do that, you bounce it. When you create a plan and then test it with somebody that knows the system, and they're like, you know what, that's going to work really well. Then number 7, you implement it. And then once you implement it, you will find out if it was successful or not. If it was just a stop sign and you didn't make it, people will still have the energy to go for it again because they did a lot of work. But if it's taking out the president and you didn't make it, most people are not going to get back up because they're going to be like, wow, that's just a giant thing. I didn't realize it was so massive. So that's kind of what you do with taking action. Well, whether you win or whether you lose, you celebrate. That's key. You know what I mean? How many of you guys like celebration? Yeah? How many of you guys like dancing? How many of you like quinceañeras? I said I wouldn't go on tangents. All right, so then you celebrate, and really, that's where the community brings the best out of who they are, and bada bing, bada boom.
Thank you so much, Ivan. Something that I didn't wanna focus in before I give it off to Daniel right here on step 6 and 7, as you're preparing the residents, like, an important thing is like, he's saying, oh, they're practicing with each other, but there's has to be like a final run through, right? Who's gonna be the note taker? Who's gonna be asking questions? Who else did we have? We had a note taker, we had someone who actually asked the
A timer.
questions. Right, so someone who's moving along the meeting, right? So when residents are finally meeting with someone from code enforcement with their city council representative, they're not going in as like intimidated, right? There's like, no, again, like we're inviting them into our space, we have these questions, and it's already, that's part of the strategy, right? It's already orchestrated, these are the questions we're gonna ask, right? If they didn't answer them, it's like, all right, well, what, like, how can you help us? Where would be money from another budget? Like, is there any grants, that are coming in or that the city can apply for? Right? And then after that, you wrap it up, have a meeting with them again to debrief. How did it go? What did we hear? Right? Making sure that that group of residents is like, everybody's hearing the same thing, right? Because we've all gone to places where it's like, someone heard something, and it's like, that's not what we were trying to communicate. So also understanding that everybody in that group understood the same information. And then, right, how you're taking action and evaluating and celebrating. And Daniel, I'm going to invite you up to talk about a little bit about your organizing work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so, going on year 6 here on staff with ENP. A couple things. My first year, I felt like I remember coming back to our executive director at that time and asking him like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't feel like I'm doing anything. And we walked through my day. He's like, tell me what you did today. And I told him, well, I talked to so-and-so over here, talked to a school teacher over here, named the people I had conversations with that day. And he was like, that's it. You're doing the work. Now give it time. See, I was used to like putting something into practice, getting an outcome, and like realizing, all right, I got my job done. This work of organizing and using asset-based community development takes a little bit longer to see the production or the fruit of your labor. So fast forward 4 years later, so 2 years ago, I was putting what you're learning about today into practice over 4 years. And you'll see a picture here. This is a coffee hour group conversation. So this was similar setting to what was happening at King Elementary. By the way, most of my work, all my work up to about a year ago has been in Southwest Fresno. And I met like 4 parents there, right? And I just started going to the meetings. Like my kids don't go to King Elementary. I don't live in Southwest Fresno, but I care about what's happening there, right? Similar to what you were sharing about like, yeah, I go there and it just feels homey, like it feels good. And so that was the vibe, got to know some folks. And the first person I really got to know was Sylvia. She was a stay-at-home mom. We have a video of her sharing her kind of testimony. And she's like, I used to just stay at home in the dark and just wait for my kids to get out of school. And then I met Daniel. It's like, oh, that's great. And so I started going through this process with Sylvia. And then from Sylvia, I met Christina. And then from Christina, I met who we call Mama Williams. She's an elder in the neighborhood. And so we call her Mama Williams. And then I met Victoria. And through having these individual learning conversations, I found out they all care about their neighborhood. 3 out of the 4 of them have kids that are elementary, so they care about the elementary school and what's happening there. And so we started coming together to have community meetings. We didn't call them community meetings. They didn't think it was a community meeting. It was just the 5 of us hanging out, but we were having a community meeting. In my mind, I'm like, we're actually working out this process. And I started telling them about what is ABCD, right? How does this work? And what are we trying to do? And they were like, yeah, let's do this. And so we were able to put together a video. This was a couple of years ago. So I just want to play a video real quick. Should go. Yep. Oh.
Oh, that sounds gonna be.
So again, I'm sharing this video to give you an idea of kind of, if you put this into practice and give it some time, it does work. Go ahead. Oh,
What footprints? I'm tired of people coming into my backyard telling me what I need. You need to hear what I said. Let me tell you what I need because you don't know me. You don't know us. This ain't some place I just go. This is where I live.
Yeah.
This is where my legacy is.
Yeah.
This is where my children's legacy is. And we have to see it like that because it's going to be here when we're not.
yeah.
So what footprints are we going to leave? The time to speak up and be heard is now.
Yeah.
I want our voice project to continue to be the go-to group to see change.
So we can all work together and benefit what we have to do in this community.
You don't need nothing to join. And you can just be yourself, and all we want is your input and see what you want and help us make the change.
Individual by themselves, you can start it, but people together can inflame a whole fire.
Can I talk?
Go ahead. Oh, now we're done. Okay.
Okay. There it is. Got it. Okay, great. So again, this isn't a story about Daniel. This is a story about 4 individuals that had a loose connection because they were all at the school, but didn't realize that they had a similar passion for their neighborhood, right? They wanted to see long-term positive change in their neighborhood. And so by implementing these steps that we've all just learned about, the organizing spiral, I was able to bring these 4 folks together. Our voice project was a name they came up all on their own. They're like, we want to become an association. So association is a fancy word for a group of people that have a common interest, right? They care about Southwest Fresno. And we're getting into all kinds of different things now. And they're like, hey, we want to call ourselves Our Voice Project. So now they have a logo and they have a color scheme. And like they're doing fundraisers. And here's the funny thing. It's not funny. This is really funny for me because it was really exciting. The first thing we did to organize was they realized 3 out of 4 of them were moms from King Elementary. And some of you have heard this story, so bear with me. But the kids at the school that were getting Student of the Month weren't being celebrated, right? And they had learned that through the ABCD spiral, we celebrate. And they're like, hey, my kid got Student of the Month, and all they got was a certificate. They didn't get a pizza party. They didn't get an assembly where they're like, hey, nothing. They would just get the certificate in their classroom, and that was it. I was like, well, let's find out what's going on. So as Ivan talked about, we did the research. And we found out from Mr. Ortega, hey, there's thousands of dollars set aside to do these celebrations for these kids that get Student of the Month. And they're like, what the heck? Why are we using that money? Well, because nobody's really asking for it. So then they said, okay, well, what do we do for the kids? Well, we learned through asset-based community development, we need to find out what we need to have a learning conversation. Well, that's hard to do with elementary kids, right? So they did a survey to figure out, to get an idea what kids would want if they got Student of the Month. And so they put 4 pictures on a piece of paper. And during lunch, these parents were on campus as the kids walked through the cafeteria saying, which one of these would you like if you got Student of the Month? And they would pick one. So then they tally it. They did that for the entire elementary school. And I forget what it was. It was like pizza and an ice cream or something, right? And guess what? The next month, there was a Student of the Month celebration. All the kids that were not Student of the Month had their lunch on the regular tables. Those are Student of the Month were on the stage, and they got their pizza and their ice cream, and then they got announced. Hey, this is Student of the Month. And it's like, that was the first victory. So that's Ivan's idea of like, what's the first step? What's something small that we can work on together that we care about? And they got a huge success out of that. And that motivated them like, okay, what can we do next? We did that on the school. What else can we do, right? That's super encouraging. So anyways, we just wanted to share that story with you as a real life example that in putting this into practice, one, yes, it will take time, a lot of time and energy, but two, it works. And people feel emboldened, they feel empowered to start taking the lead on their own when we put this in practice. All right, I gotta see you next.
Questions,
Oh, yes,
comments?
questions, comments? Take a deep breath. That was a lot of information.
So there's gonna be another training that goes into more like.
Yes, yeah, good, good. So yeah, next month, we have it on the slide as well. November 1st will be our next training on learning conversations. So today was about talking about the overview of what is ABCD, what's the spiral, how do you use it? And then the learning conversations is the next tool in ABCD. That's the crucial tool to learning about those in your community. So we'll dig deep into that next month, November 1st.
I really appreciate, like, I know I did this last time,
Yeah.
but it was different this time. And it might be because the experiences I had between that,
Okay.
but, or maybe it was Ivan, or I don't know, whatever it was, it's giving me more insight of what's really important is the consistency.
That's good.
Being consistent and then taking what you learn and then revitalizing it and taking what you learn and just keep doing it, because I kind of already wrote a plan, and that's from you guys teaching me how to
That's great.
write out plans, and I was like, man, we have the assets
Yes,
that are sitting in our midst
right.
and what they're good at, but we're not spinning their wheels yet. We're
Right.
not helping them
Okay.
kickstart things, so
Yeah.
I'm excited. Thank you
Good,
guys
man.
for-
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
I say being more encouraged to, like, say, tell people, even though you took this class,
Come back and
come back
get
and hear it.
refreshed.
'Cause I could have been like, oh, I already heard
Already done
it,
it. Yeah, yeah.
but I'm glad I
That's
came.
good. Thanks for sharing that, Oscar.
thank
Yeah,
you.
it means a lot. I'll come to you two next. So we will be sending out a survey post this training. Would love to get your feedback. Please fill out. It'll be simple, 5 questions. Like, before coming to this training today, this is where I knew about ABCD training. After this is like, I'm on number 5. I feel like I'm super informed, right? So just want to throw a plug in for that. And then another just kind of teaching point really quick is you have, I believe, from my perspective, through your drive budget, enough money to hire somebody to be a community organizer. Whether that's part-time or full-time, that's up to you, how you want to navigate that. That's a crucial piece for this work to move forward. Somebody has to keep leading that charge, if I may. With that being said, as you start implementing learning conversations, which we'll talk about more on November 1st, you're gonna come across people in your neighborhood that have a similar passion, that also want to spark other people in the neighborhood to care about the neighborhood, right? And have a way of carrying themselves like, yeah, I could send this person out. So the reason I'm sharing that is because it will take those people to do this work for your neighborhood hub. You and your team, you're gonna get tapped out. There's no way you're gonna reach your entire neighborhood hub in the next 2 years. And you might not as you lean on residents, but the long-term picture is that you do have a positive impact in your entire neighborhood hub. But we have to lean on those in the neighborhood that also have that gift set, right? Which is why it's important to be mindful that they also are part of this solution, right? So think about it. One of the things, and we'll talk about this next month maybe, is like, can you invite 2 more people to the next meeting? It's like, yeah, I can. Can you have 2 learning conversations with people and get to the next? Yeah, I can. So that multiplies, right? It's not just you and your hired staff that are doing all this work. It's about bringing other people into the process. I just wanted to make sure that was, because it can feel daunting, like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna do this? Well, again, give it time. Melissa?
So I just love that you say give it time. And you showed the video for
Yeah.
our voices, how they begin, only because we partnered with them last month.
Okay.
For their first block party at Frank Gate.
Yes.
And to see where they are now, and they were so excited, and they had the mayor come out, and you know, what they've done, so I enjoyed seeing. Where they
Awesome.
began, just right there on the sidewalk,
Yeah.
to what they've done now.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
This might be
Rhonda?
a really specific question.
Yeah,
Or it is specific. Do you have ideas or thoughts on how to partner with our council people to understand their perspective and agenda? We're talking about here, empowering our neighbors to go to them with something they want. But I think part of the relationship building is hearing
yeah,
when they're not running for office,
Sure,
right? But like in a
right.
relationship
right.
to hear, because sometimes we're not fighting against them. Sometimes they're on what we want.
Yeah.
We want to know that so we can partner with them. Other
Uh-huh.
times we know we're coming against maybe what they think they're doing.
Sure.
So any thoughts on how to do
Yeah,
that well?
So again, learning conversation, we're gonna take a deep dive next month. But that's essentially it, is I think a lot of times Ivan had mentioned that when a council member walks in, you know, a lot of us will like, oh, you pay homage to the council member, right? We hold them, for some reason, we hold them so like as if they're the president, right? And I would invite you to like challenge that and say like, as Ivan said, they're here to serve us. Right? So we are co-laborers, if I may, in the long-term well-being of our neighborhoods. So how do I meet them just like that? And I think that's where, you know, your team and whoever's hired to be your community organizer should start building that relationship. And just, like you said, have a casual one-on-one with them. Implement some of these tools that we've shared with you today to ask some questions. Like, hey, if we were working on an issue, hypothetically speaking, how would you like to be brought into that process? At which point, you know? And again, I'll come to you next time. Yeah, it's just building that relationship. And I think that'll pay dividends in the long run when we really need to get something done. We've already been part of that process. So Miguel Arias has been representing District 3 the last, I don't know how many years. He's terming out this year. Yeah, I've had a handful. He likes to go to breakfast. So we've had a handful of breakfast meetings. And honestly, it's just casual talking, not really any agenda or issue, very loosely, but just fostering that relationship. I think that's really where it starts. Yeah, Ivan?
Yeah, I was gonna suggest that as you create your asset map and as you do your survey and then start engaging learning conversations.
Ivan,
Oh,
I forgot we're recording.
all right. So as you're I forgot what I said. As you're doing your asset map and like learning conversations, and you're thinking about the constituents or the residents that live in that space, it's also very important to include your council member, maybe the police captain or pop officer, because even though they may not live, well, council members I think have to live in that district. They are still members of that community. And not only that, but when you do a learning conversation, so the point was do a learning conversation with them, because you will also get more inventory and they will also get consciousness. And not only that, but sometimes council members will tell you all the good stuff that they want you to hear, which they're giving you ammunition for the future in case they become the villain in the story, right? So they told you all of this stuff, and then later on, if they're against you, you can say, wait a minute, in our learning conversation, you said that you cared about the children, but now you don't care about all this pollution that's gassing them. Does that make sense? So it's important to do learning conversations with them as well, and it could result in a healthy relationship or an antagonistic one. And at the end of the day, even though you're treating them as a community member, just keep this in mind. It'll be beneficial for you in the future. Elected officials are not your friends when it comes to community work. They will try to make you their friend, but a lot of it is not real. They'll take advantage of that. They'll flatter you up, all of this stuff. So just remember this, apart from like the residents who you can form friendships with, the council members are robots in a machine. So they have a duty to push certain buttons. And at the end of the day, they're going to violate their own ethics and they're going to violate probably your demands. So just make sure they're also not your enemy, okay? So not your friend, not your enemy. They are a robot in a machine.
They're your friend and me.
You're your friend. Community organizer once told me, in this work, never have any permanent enemies or any permanent friends. That's a philosophy some live out, and I just think it's something to keep in mind. Not necessarily when I live out. I don't think somebody will permanently be my. Anyways, just something to think about. Yeah. Other questions for your first day? How was it? Yeah, for sure.
Good information.
Good. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Go ahead, yeah.
So version 2, so it's something really useful. Whatever you guys want. Great.
Yeah. How do you see it being useful when you go back to Adams neighborhood and working with families and kids? What's an idea maybe that's going through your head? How it could be useful?
Like what you guys were saying, maybe bring like different parents and have them bring. I was just thinking about it, like you invite different parents Or just the same parents that come.
Yeah,
Something new that they will do is that bring people.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, simply inviting them into the space.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
I think that's a good question, yeah, to ask everyone, like, what's brewing, yeah.
Yeah,
Community as in like your neighborhood or community like say, for myself, I would like to say that I'm like an advocate or a representative for the Hmong community.
uh-huh.
Which is not just one neighborhood. it's
Yeah.
All out throughout
Yeah.
the residents, so.
Yeah, I think this strategy can be used in all of what you named. Our training specifically for the work you'll be doing in Webster, but that doesn't mean you can't apply it to the mom community. It's a great tool that can be used in any space, really. And again, at the core of it, the nuts and bolts are everybody has something good that they can contribute. And this work here, or this information, is to help you figure out what that is, that they can then contribute to the long-term positive change. Yeah, so it can be used anywhere. Yeah. All right, when's the next training? November 13th. Oh, yes, you're right. So yes, hey, happy birthday, happy early birthday. So there is 2 trainings. Thank you for pointing that out, Oscar. November 13th is with CDCF. Oh, yeah. And they'll be talking about career nexus. So that's what's coming from the larger umbrella of Drive. And the platform they have that can lead to jobs for people in your neighborhood. We'll all learn in that space. We know very little about that as well. So November 13th, I think locations to be determined.
No, at First Press,
Oh, it'll be at First Press Church,
just down the street.
just down the street. But November 1st will be another training here. And again, these are trainings we do on a regular, so it's a review. And especially for those that are gonna be your people going into the community, that's really what they're designed for. So learning conversations, which is one of the steps in the spiral, we'll be taking a deep dive on next month, November 1st, right here. You gonna say something?
Yeah, do we go further into the estimate?
Did we cover estimate?
Well, this is really a synopsis. So it's just giving everybody like the overall of ABCD. I think in the following sessions, we narrow in on each one like this.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, as you do the learning conversations, you're gonna get information. What do you do with that information? And part of what you do with that information is mapping it. Yeah, so we'll make sure we carve enough time to get into that on the 1st.
Okay, raise your hand if this is the first time you've ever heard about asset-based community development. First time,
2 people, yeah, that's all right.
and like the details of asset mapping